Challenges will undoubtedly rise. But if there's one thing that I've learned in my life, it's that meaningful change never comes easily.
Did you notice that a certain Prince Harry flew from LA all the way to Shanghai to apparently promote greener travel?
In hot air balloon, or did he fly in an aeroplane?
I think it was a jet, don't you, Tom?
Right, okay, well...
Picture this. A British prince flies halfway around the world to deliver what he believes will be a game-changing speech to world leaders. Instead, he watches in horror as dozens of delegates stand up and walk out while he's still talking. The cameras capture every empty seat, every awkward silence, every moment of his complete humiliation on the global stage. This isn't fiction. This is exactly what happened to Prince Harry at the Envision 2025 summit in Beijing.
Right, now the Times is quite usefully. Now, it's not known what flight Harry did take to China, and Travelist, the company that he's involved with, has declined to share their estimates with this newspaper anyway. But on average, a passenger travelling first class on a return flight from LA to Shanghai produces the equivalent of 6,311.32 kilos.
And the fallout has been nothing short of catastrophic. What was supposed to be his triumphant return to international diplomacy became one of the most embarrassing moments in modern royal history. The irony is almost too perfect to believe. Harry flew from Los Angeles to Shanghai, presumably in a private jet, to promote greener travel and environmental consciousness. The carbon footprint of that single journey, over 6,000 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. But the environmental hypocrisy was just the beginning of this diplomatic disaster. The Envision 2025 summit isn't some celebrity charity gala where famous faces show up for photo opportunities. This is a high-level economic and innovation forum where world leaders, government officials, and corporate executives gather to discuss serious matters: infrastructure development, technological advancement, trade relationships, and China's ambitious 5-year national strategy.
Also, I wonder whether he's a bit of a useful idiot as well, going off to China to sort of, I don't know, he's lending his support, isn't he, really, for the way that they're doing things, presumably.
And yet,
at least it looks like that.
I just wish we were doing what China is doing when it comes to energy.
A bit of everything.
They have just this all... They are producing more solar power. By 2030, they will be producing more solar power.
When Prince Harry's name appeared on the speaker list, expectations were set. The organizers prominently featured his keynote address on their website, highlighting it in bold font as one of the main attractions. Chinese media covered his arrival with the kind of attention reserved for heads of state and genuine diplomatic figures. But here's where the first red flag should have been raised. What exactly qualified Prince Harry to address world leaders about China's economic future? He holds no official government position, represents no monarchy in any official capacity, and has no background in international trade, technology, or economic policy.
Some people, they take their problems with them, and I think that's where Harry is right now. And Harry has not built as much in America as Meghan has.
And also when he gave that interview, sorry to bang on that, but to the BBC, he looked really...
He looked so angry.
He looked so... Harry is
Yet somehow, he secured a keynote slot at one of Asia's most prestigious economic summits. The answer, according to multiple sources, was simple: star power. The organizers believed his celebrity status would draw attention and legitimacy to their event. What happened next will go down in diplomatic history as a masterclass in how not to read a room. Instead of addressing the summit's core themes, artificial intelligence, clean energy infrastructure, trade partnerships, or China's Belt and Road Initiative, Harry launched into a deeply personal meditation on emotional well-being, climate trauma, and what he termed global healing.
Fantastic in America that people can get excited about and stop, and then he will be able to let go of the past. But I think
I think you should be his new advisor.
Well, he doesn't listen to his advisors. So.
We give Harry and Meghan advice every week on this show. I can confirm that I don't think they listen to or take away any of the advice. But we become body language experts in many ways, don't we?
The disconnect was immediate and jarring. Here were Chinese officials, corporate leaders from across Asia, and international delegates who had traveled thousands of miles to discuss concrete policy solutions and business partnerships. Instead, they got a lecture on redefining masculinity and the importance of emotional intelligence in leadership. One delegate, speaking to the South China Morning Post, captured the room's sentiment perfectly: "This isn't therapy. We're here for ideas, not trauma lectures. Another attendee described the speech as a self-indulgent TED Talk disguised as diplomacy. The content wasn't just misaligned, it was tone-deaf to the point of being offensive.
So it's not hugely well listened to.
But the publicity around it is amazing.
Well, not so much anymore. I think, as I say, I think the journalists are kind of turning off.
Every day people are writing about it. I mean, I'm out of the news world, and I promise you, people never stop writing.
Harry spoke about Western concepts of emotional literacy to an audience of Asian leaders dealing with real-world challenges like food security, technological sovereignty, and economic development. His failure to acknowledge regional context, incorporate any meaningful data, or offer actionable insights exposed a fundamental truth. He was completely out of his depth. What started as subtle movement in the back rows quickly escalated into something unprecedented in diplomatic circles. By the 12-minute mark of Harry's speech, the exodus had begun in earnest. Government officials, corporate executives, and academic leaders began filing out of the conference hall in what appeared to be a coordinated response to the irrelevant content. The optics were devastating. Footage from the summit shows row after row of empty seats behind Harry as he continued speaking, seemingly oblivious to the mass departure unfolding around him. Over 40 individuals left before he finished, including several senior Chinese party officials whose early departure represented a significant diplomatic insult. In Chinese culture, where concepts of face and respect hold paramount importance, walking out on a keynote speaker is an extraordinary breach of protocol. It's not done lightly or without serious cause. The fact that it happened on such a scale and included high-ranking officials sent a clear message. Harry's presence and message were not just unwelcome, they were actively offensive to the assembled delegates. The walkout wasn't random or spontaneous. Multiple sources confirmed it was a coordinated response from attendees who felt uncomfortable with the speech's Western-centric tone, its complete irrelevance to the summit's objectives, and what many perceived as Harry's patronizing attitude toward a global audience. As news of the walkout spread beyond the conference hall, Harry's team went into full crisis mode. Sources close to the situation described a frantic atmosphere as his communications staff realized the magnitude of the disaster unfolding in real time. Prince Harry himself was reportedly furious and completely blindsided by the negative reception. Multiple witnesses described him as visibly shaken and clueless about what had gone wrong. One senior attendee noted that he honestly thought he was being profound. He had no idea how poorly it was being received. In a move that revealed just how rattled he was by the experience, Harry stormed out of a scheduled post-speech press briefing, snapping at his aides and demanding explanations for why his message hadn't resonated with the audience. The tantrum was witnessed by several delegates and summit organizers, adding another layer of embarrassment to an already catastrophic situation. His PR team's response was equally telling. Within hours, they were flooding journalists with pre-approved talking points emphasizing the importance of emotional literacy in global leadership. They begged media outlets for positive spin, and even considered pulling Harry from upcoming international engagements to prevent further damage. The international media response was swift and merciless. Germany's Der Spiegel, India's Hindustan Times, and the Financial Times all ran headlines highlighting the speech's failure. Terms like falls flat, Mrs. Mark, and misfire and soft power diplomacy dominated the coverage. What made the media response particularly damaging was its consistency across different regions and political perspectives. This wasn't partisan criticism or cultural misunderstanding. It was a global consensus that Harry had fundamentally failed to meet the moment. Even traditionally sympathetic outlets struggled to defend the performance. CNN, which has generally provided favorable coverage of Harry and Meghan's post-royal activities, could only manage to call the speech misaligned with the summit's intent, diplomatic language for a complete disaster. The satirical response was perhaps even more damaging to Harry's reputation. Australian television mocked his performance, joking that he thought he was delivering a TED Talk, but it turned into a dead talk. Chinese social media users flooded platforms with memes comparing his speech to a sleep aid. American late-night television picked up the story, with hosts openly mocking Harry's pretensions to global statesmanship. The consensus was clear. This wasn't just a bad speech, It was a fundamental misunderstanding of his own role and relevance on the world stage. The diplomatic silence, when nobody comes to your defense. Perhaps the most telling aspect of the entire debacle was what didn't happen afterward. In diplomatic circles, when a high-profile speaker faces criticism, allies and supporters typically rally with statements of support or context-providing explanations. For Harry, that support never materialized. Not a single senior official from China, the Commonwealth, the United Kingdom, or any other nation issued a statement defending his performance or explaining his presence at the summit. The diplomatic silence was deafening and spoke volumes about his actual standing in international circles. Even more revealing was the response from summit organizers themselves. Harry's name, once prominently featured on the event website, was quietly moved down the speaker list. Screenshots from earlier versions showed his keynote highlighted in bold font. Within days, it sat below a junior panel on blockchain integration. No press releases praised his appearance. No social media clips highlighted memorable moments from his speech. No organizers offered public thanks for his participation. This level of organizational distancing is unprecedented for a keynote speaker and represents a clear signal that his presence was viewed as a liability rather than an asset. The royal family's strategic distance. The response from Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace was equally telling in its complete absence. No statements of support, no diplomatic cover, no attempts to provide context or explanation for Harry's performance. This silence was entirely strategic. Royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams observed that the firm understands brand management, and this was not something they wanted their crest anywhere near. The monarchy, having learned hard lessons about guilt by association, clearly wanted no connection to Harry's diplomatic embarrassment. The calculated nature of this silence cannot be overstated. The royal family had advanced knowledge of Harry's appearance at the summit, but chose not to associate themselves with it in any way. Their decision proved prescient as the event unfolded into exactly the kind of reputational disaster they had sought to avoid. This strategic distancing reinforces a broader pattern. Harry's solo ventures are increasingly viewed as liabilities by the institution he once represented. Every attempt to position himself as a global statesman only seems to highlight his lack of preparation, relevance, and basic diplomatic skills. The broader pattern, a reputation in freefall. The China summit disaster wasn't an isolated incident, but rather the latest in a series of missteps that have steadily eroded Harry's international credibility. His attempts to reinvent himself as a global thought leader have consistently fallen short, revealing a fundamental disconnect between his self-perception and his actual capabilities. This pattern reflects a deeper problem. Harry appears to believe that celebrity status automatically translates into moral authority and diplomatic relevance. His approach to international engagement seems based on the assumption that his personal story and emotional journey qualify him to advise world leaders on complex geopolitical challenges. The Chinese delegates' reaction suggests that this assumption is not just wrong but actively counterproductive. Leaders dealing with real-world challenges, economic development, technological competition, climate adaptation, have little patience for therapeutic approaches to international relations. The environmental irony of Harry's China trip deserves special attention because it perfectly encapsulates the contradictions that have come to define his public persona. Flying from Los Angeles to Shanghai to promote environmental consciousness represents exactly the kind of elite hypocrisy that undermines serious climate advocacy. The carbon footprint calculations are stark. A first-class return flight from LA to Shanghai produces over 6,000 kilograms of CO2 equivalent, more than many people produce in an entire year. For someone positioning himself as an environmental advocate, this level of carbon-intensive travel to deliver a speech about sustainability represents a fundamental contradiction. This hypocrisy wasn't lost on the summit attendees or the international media. When your actions directly contradict your message, credibility evaporates instantly. Harry's environmental advocacy, already viewed skeptically due to his lifestyle choices, took another significant hit from this high-profile contradiction. The China summit exposed a fundamental question that has followed Harry since leaving royal duties. What exactly qualifies him to address world leaders on matters of global importance? His background includes military service and charitable work, but no formal training in economics, international relations, environmental science, or diplomatic protocol. Yet he continues to position himself as a thought leader on complex global challenges, accepting speaking engagements at high-level forums where his lack of relevant expertise becomes glaringly obvious. The Envision 2025 summit was supposed to showcase his evolution from celebrity to serious commentator on world affairs. Instead, it highlighted the vast gap between his ambitions and his capabilities. When placed alongside genuine experts, policymakers, and business leaders, Harry's contributions appeared shallow, irrelevant, and self-indulgent. The cultural misunderstanding. Western therapy meets Eastern pragmatism. The cultural dimension of Harry's failure cannot be ignored. His speech approach, heavy on personal emotion, individual trauma, and therapeutic concepts, reflected a distinctly Western, individualistic worldview that was fundamentally misaligned with his audience's expectations and cultural context. Asian business and political culture tends to prioritize collective outcomes, practical solutions, and hierarchical respect. Harry's focus on personal healing, emotional intelligence, and individual transformation struck many attendees as inappropriate for the setting and disrespectful of their time and attention. This cultural misunderstanding wasn't just a communication failure, it was a diplomatic insult. Harry's apparent assumption that his personal journey and emotional insights would resonate with Chinese officials and Asian business leaders revealed a level of cultural ignorance that has no place in international diplomacy. Perhaps most damaging for Harry's future prospects was the reported sponsor backlash following his performance. Multiple sources indicated that several summit sponsors complained to event organizers, questioning why an unelected foreign prince with no active role in global diplomacy had been given a keynote slot over genuine policy experts and innovation leaders. This sponsor feedback represents a fundamental shift in how Harry's celebrity status is perceived in professional contexts. What organizers had hoped would be a draw for attention and legitimacy instead became a source of embarrassment and criticism. The implications extend far beyond the single event. If major corporate sponsors are beginning to view Harry's presence as a liability rather than an asset, his ability to secure future high-profile speaking engagements will be severely compromised. The digital response to Harry's performance added another layer of humiliation to an already devastating situation. Chinese social media users created memes comparing his speech to sleep aids, while Western platforms mocked his pretensions to global statesmanship. This social media mockery is particularly damaging because it creates a permanent record of his failure that will follow him indefinitely. Every future speaking engagement will be viewed through the lens of the China summit disaster, making it increasingly difficult for him to rebuild his credibility. The viral nature of the mockery also ensures that the story reaches audiences far beyond diplomatic and political circles. Harry's failure has become a global joke, undermining not just his professional aspirations but his overall public image. The China summit disaster raises serious questions about Harry's future viability as a public figure seeking to influence global affairs. His performance revealed fundamental deficiencies in preparation, cultural awareness, and basic diplomatic skills that cannot be easily remedied. More importantly, it demonstrated that his celebrity status, rather than opening doors to meaningful engagement, may actually be closing them. Event organizers, sponsors, and audiences are beginning to recognize that fame without substance creates more problems than it solves. The pattern of failures, from this summit to previous controversial appearances, suggests that Harry's approach to public engagement is fundamentally flawed. His continued attempts to position himself as a global thought leader despite lacking relevant expertise or cultural sensitivity are creating a cycle of embarrassment that becomes harder to break with each incident. The Envision 2025 summit will be remembered as the moment when Prince Harry's pretensions to global statesmanship were definitively exposed as hollow celebrity posturing. His performance represented everything wrong with modern celebrity culture's approach to serious issues: superficial understanding, cultural ignorance, and an assumption that fame automatically confers wisdom. The walkout, the media backlash, the sponsor complaints, and the social media mockery all point to the same conclusion. Harry has fundamentally misunderstood his role and relevance in contemporary international affairs. His attempts to trade on royal connections while lacking royal authority, to offer global leadership while demonstrating provincial thinking, and to command respect while showing cultural insensitivity have created a perfect storm of reputational damage. The silence from potential allies, the royal family, government officials, fellow celebrities, and even sympathetic media outlets suggests that this damage may be irreversible. When nobody comes to your defense after such a public failure, it indicates that your credibility has been completely exhausted. Harry's China summit disaster serves as a cautionary tale for any public figure who confuses fame with expertise, celebrity with authority, and personal experience with universal wisdom. In an interconnected world where cultural sensitivity, genuine expertise, and diplomatic skill matter more than ever, his performance demonstrated the dangers of assuming that good intentions and celebrity status are sufficient qualifications for global leadership. The empty chairs in that Beijing conference hall weren't just a rejection of one poorly crafted speech, they were a referendum on Harry's entire approach to public engagement since leaving royal duties. The verdict was unanimous, devastating, and likely permanent. In trying to establish himself as a global voice for change, Prince Harry instead became a global example of how not to engage with the complex challenges facing our interconnected world. The transformation from respected royal to international embarrassment is now complete, and the path back to credibility appears permanently blocked by his own missteps and misplaced ambitions.